Hey gang, it do be stream time. Our twice a month hangout here on the YouTubes. I hope you guys are doing well. Get myself a little situated here. Okay, yep, that'll do. All right, let's get this party started. Today's is going to be, hang on a second, I'm going to sneeze. I don't want to sneeze, but I'm going to sneeze. Ah! Oh, come on. If you're going to sneeze, sneeze. Ah, it went away. And I hate that. I almost wish I could have just sneezed. Yeah, this one is the Hangout stream. Oh, I heard that. You guys know my OBS is connected, right? I can hear you over on Twitch. Thank you, VOD, for the gifts. Okay. Anyway, yeah, of the two streams we have every month here on YouTube, this is the chill hangout Q&A stream, and then we have the game stream later in the month. So I hear nothing. I'm pretty sure you guys can hear it too. It's going through the same source, the same audio source. So NG, thank you for the gift sub. And Ree will remember this. Okay. Let's do this thing. Let me go ahead and transfer over so we can see each other. Well, you can see me better. All I see is your names. Okay, there we are. I am here. Let me put this over here so I can see what you guys are saying. How am I today? I'm okay. Yesterday was a super productive day, which is usually a good thing. But, like, you know, sometimes it can be a little too much. You can wear yourself out, that kind of thing. Let me move this window over here, I think. There we go. Now I can see you guys better. Moving windows around, my favorite. So, oh, did Sandwich do something? Sandwich did something. Sandwich is stealth. What did Sandwich do? Thank you for the bit, Sandwich. Y'all just called Sandwich out, because I wouldn't have heard that one. That alert doesn't go off. So, happy little gremlin. Yeah, that sounds like a cute one. Some sort of, well, in our case, it'd be a goober if we're sticking with the brand integrity. Happy little goober. I'm not sure how that would look, though. We'd have to come up with a design for that. Maybe I'll talk to JoJo or something. Okay, so here we are. You guys good? You guys like done having your fun, I hope? As a new follower, thank you for the wonderful stories and amazing work you do. Thank you. I'm glad you like the work. I appreciate that. So yeah, this is just our chill vibe hangout in the middle of the week. If you guys are feeling like it's been kind of a rough week, like I said, my day yesterday was ridiculously busy, but like in a good way. I got a lot done. But now I'm just sort of like wishing I'd gotten more sleep. You know the vibe. So it's a good time to just be chill with you guys, and hopefully today will go a little lighter. I am going to go run errands later. Got some stuff I need to do, unfortunately, but then after that, maybe I'll be able to take it a little bit easy. Probably not, though, let's face it. I've got some really great scripts in the hopper. Had most of my calls with the Olympian patrons over the last couple of days, and everybody had some really, really good ideas. So it's one of those things where I'm excited to work on them. I'm excited to write. So even if I'm like barely keeping my eyes open, I'll be sitting there on the couch with my laptop, like desperately trying to put words down. So Google Doc is growing. It always grows. There's a new one every month. Let's see what we're at for this month. It is the 6th of the month, and this document is 40 pages so far. for the 6th of the month. And then I also have a separate document for this big collab thing that I'm working on, which is, hold up, where's that tab? I think it's this one. That one's 13 pages. So, yes, to answer your question, big Google Docs. Yeah, they usually end up between like 85 and 100 pages by the end of the month, depending on many factors. It's been a harsh few days. Yeah, it has. Being awarded with a second creator stream of the evening for being awake at ungodly hours. Yeah, I try to accommodate as much as I can hours-wise. Like, this is evening in the States, afternoon to evening in the States. But I know for Europe it's pretty late, so I did try doing some streams that would be more favorable to Europe time, but people just kind of didn't turn out for them. Which is fine, but like, yeah, it's all right. Google, how do I keep my docs from lagging? I don't quite understand the question. You don't know what Google Docs are? Well, so Google has its own sort of like Microsoft suite of applications. Google Docs is like Word, and there's Google Sheets, which is like Excel, things like that. They're all just built into your Google account. Like if you have Gmail, they're all there. They're in your Drive. And everybody gets like a certain amount of storage, which you can always upgrade, I suppose. But I do all of my creating in that format because then it goes with me everywhere. You know, I can access my Google account from anywhere and not have to have my laptop specifically on me with like a static Word document that can't go anywhere else unless I email it to myself, I suppose, which is weird. So yeah, Google Docs is great. Updates on the fly, things like that. Gives me the peace of mind of knowing that even if this laptop completely shits its bed, it's like those files are all fine. They're all in the cloud. So yeah, all my script writing is done there. I start a new document every month and I write all of my scripts in there. I used to keep a separate file for like the patron only scripts, but that ended up just being more work, so I just put it all in one. So each file is just labeled with whatever month and year it is, and I get to work. So I have many of them. Many script documents. So Google Docs instead of using Word. Yeah, that's basically it. That's just where I compose my scripts. And then too, if I'm doing a collab with somebody, I can share it with them really easily. Like when I do collabs with Lupus especially, I'll give him editing power, so if he wants to tweak stuff or whatever, and when he was making his own audios there for a while, I was writing all of his scripts for him, so it was really easy for me just to write them in Google Docs and then just share them with him, and he could go in and tweak stuff or, you know, make it sound more like himself if he wanted to. Yeah, basically like Office Suite, yeah. Multiple scripts in a single document, yeah. Like the month of September, I open every document with a page of template stuff that I just copy over from the previous month. It's things like the descriptions and stuff that go into the YouTube descriptions, the shorts descriptions, things like that. And then, and also the list of artist credits that, you know, the different thumbnails that I use. If I am using a thumbnail, not something from like a stock footage website that I paid for, but like art that I commissioned from an artist, I want to make sure to give them credit. So I keep a list of those as well. And it's funny because at this point, like I can just look at the artist's name and I know exactly which one they made. Like I remember all of them, and there are so many, but I remember, like they just stick, you know? So after that, I start the scripts, and I just, like, every time I start a new script, I start a new page in the document. I just, you know, insert a page break, and then put the title of the script, underline it, and start writing. And then by the end of the month, we have 80 to 100 pages. So, yeah, I know Office is trying, but I'm comfortable with Google at this point. It's been years. I'm perfectly fine with it. I realize that all these big companies are the devil, but it's fine. Lets me do my work. Any plans for Halloween? You mean like for the channel? I assume that's what you mean, but I just want to clarify. Diet Coke. Okay, I'm gonna close that. I assume you guys are chill now. Excellent. Yeah, let me see if I can think of anything housekeeping wise. And like I said, this one's like the more hangout Q&A format. So if you guys have questions about the channel or my process or whatever, this is a good time to ask. I've talked about a lot of that stuff before, but I also know a lot of people are new. So if there's anything you want to know, or if you just forgot from the last time I talked about it. For the channel, yes, the big collab that I'm working on is probably going to target Halloween, a Halloween release. I was hoping for the anniversary of the channel, but that's not going to happen. It's just way too big of a project. The script is only about a quarter written. So yeah, I'm hoping at this point for a Halloween release because I have to like carve out the time to work on it. Guys? Oh, that's a follow. Okay. That one's fine. I'm fine with the follows. I'm leaving those alerts on though, just so I can hear you. So yeah, hopefully, yeah, those alerts are all over on Twitch that you're seeing. I'm watching you guys. Yeah, hopefully the collab will be ready in time, and there's a lot of variables, there's a lot of moving parts that if something doesn't line up properly, it won't work, but it will eventually get done. It's just I'm hoping for an October drop on that one. So yes, that is the answer to your question. The spooky stuff. Yeah, last year I went kind of light on the spooky stuff. I didn't go too hard. Like in previous years, I've gone pretty hard on some of the more uncomfortable spooky stuff. Last year, I just wasn't feeling it. So I kept it light. I think I need to put a hat on this model. Where's my hats? Let's do that one. That's cute. It's pretty fucking cold out this morning. It was like 16 degrees in my room this morning, which is like 59, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, because we don't have heat, and it's winter, because it's Australia, but that's okay, we have blankets. Blankets are nice. What is today's temperature? It's 6 degrees Celsius outside right now, but it looks like we're gonna get up to maybe 18. Well, that'll be pretty if we get there. Yeah, the low was 4 this morning. Pretty fucking chilly. So. All right. Where do I typically get ideas for scripts? My brain. So obviously if there's like an Olympian script, like with the Olympian patrons, I denote that in the description and on the thumbnail. And for those, I do calls with the Olympians and we sit and just chit chat about different ideas. We hash out different potential directions to take things in. I try to, as nicely as possible, shut down any ideas that are just not executable in an audio format, because sometimes they're just not. Like sometimes somebody will have a great idea and it's either just not going to fit an audio format, or I can't make it work in my brain because the logic doesn't track. Like I really need logic to track, even in a fantasy, like a fantasy or sci-fi world, it still needs to follow the rules of the established universe. Whatever the rules are that I created for this universe, they need to follow it. And so that's the kind of conversations that we have. But so those are really the only ideas that I get that are outside of my own brain. The rest just come from inside my head. And sometimes it's literally just like, I'll be standing in the shower or something and be like, oh shit, that's a good idea. I'm gonna go do that. And I just trot out, or I take that back. Lupus is actually really good at coming up with ideas. Like many of the collabs that he and I have done, the Tsundere NPC, the Doctor for Magical Creatures, that kind of thing. Those all came about because of conversations we had like in the car. Like we'll be driving somewhere and we'll just start going back and forth, role-playing some weird, silly little scenario. And then that shit will become a full-on audio or sometimes a full-on audio series because he's stupid creative, this guy. Like, holy shit. So just like going back and forth with him will sometimes help me come up with something pretty entertaining, I think. So yeah, I have to give credit where it's due. And every so often I'll just poke one of my friends like, hey, I need a shitpost idea. Like the Andre cell phone was a shitpost idea from Sit, one of my friends and one of the first patrons actually to ever support the channel. So he was like, well, I have the shitpost idea and it's pretty bad. And I was like, do tell. So yeah. And then at the end of the day, like once somebody gives me an idea or when somebody suggests something like the Olympian patrons do, it's kind of up to me to execute it, to take that idea and turn it into a 10 to 15 minute audio that goes somewhere and does something. So yeah, I hope you guys like the next bootlegger that's coming out tomorrow. That'll be fun. Tomorrow for me, and it's still 2 days out for you guys. Yeah, I'm in Australia. It's the future. So, okay. Seen any good creepypasta? Not lately. Any life updates? Let me give you a quick update as far as a couple of things I guess I could share. So one thing is that Lupus and I have been going out more into nature and, taking videos and stuff. And most of you guys already know this, but for those who don't, here is the link to, we now officially have a channel specifically for us wandering around in nature and like looking at kangaroos and stuff. The first few videos on there are a little scuffed because we didn't actually check the camera settings before we went out and did it, which, whoops. And also it was encased in its waterproof case, so the sound was very muffled, so I ended up just layering music over most of them. But in the future, we'll set up the little mic that I have and get some actual footage, like good footage of like camping and fishing and all that shit that we're planning on doing now that it's warming up a little bit. So yes, check that out if you'd like. You get to see Lupus's hands and you get to see our shadows and you get to see the back of my head. It's the sum total of reveals that we're ever going to do probably. But yeah. So let's see. Where's the funny little crab? He's on my shoulder. Ta-da! So yeah, definitely check out the Adventures channel. I'm hoping to get more cool stuff on there soon. And then also this coming weekend will be the second episode of the recast, the little sort of like pseudo podcast we do over on Twitch that you guys wanted. This week we're going to be watching Aussie dash cam videos, which again, this was a Lupus idea. We're going to be watching dash cam videos specifically from Australia. We've been doing a lot of this in our spare time, like while we're having dinner we'll watch these things, and they're pretty hilarious. But I've also created bingo. I made some bingo sheets so we can track things like whether the person in the crash was a P-plater or whether they said fucking hell, things like that. So I haven't decided yet if there's going to be prizes for bingo, because I'll be honest, somebody's probably going to hit bingo within the first like 3 videos. So maybe I'll find a way to give away a sticker or something. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's going to be this coming, and that's Friday night your guys' time, Saturday morning my time, over on Twitch, not here. So if you don't follow me on Twitch, definitely follow me on Twitch, because that's where we do most of these little hangouts and streams and stuff. Okay, let's see. Have I seen the Five Nights at Freddy's movie trailer? Yeah, I think I did actually. We've been also going down a rabbit hole of FNAF lore a lot, and it's interesting, it's entertaining, but yeah, for the last couple of weeks we've done a lot of that. So, okay. Has Lupus befriended a root? No. No, he has not. It's very sad. He tries. It's almost like they don't want a 6-foot-tall human guy coming at them with hands outstretched. I can't imagine why. I saw a couple of roos yesterday on my walk. I went for a walk in the afternoon after I got my work stuff done, and saw like a mommy and a couple, like one baby, and then like youngish one. Kangaroos are almost constantly pregnant, so there's a lot of babies. There's just a lot of roos, honestly. There's a lot of roos in Australia, guys. Hydrate? I can absolutely. How much of FNAF lore is Matt Pat making it up? I mean, he tries to give. You can see he's trying to give, like, evidence, justification. He's doing his best. That said, some of it is definitely a stretch. You know what? Let me put my little Diet Coke in my hand. Faces. There we go. Diet Coke. Diet Coke. Give me. Okay, there we go. Diet Coke. Yes. Did it. Stretch. Okay. There we go. Good stretch. So yeah, channel stuff. Let me think of anything else going on channel-wise. Tomorrow is the patron pick game, which it looks like is going to be Outer Worlds. Recast on Friday. Yeah, I think that's kind of it for housekeeping at the moment. I'm like desperately trying to think if there's something I forgot, because I feel like there is, but whatever, it's fine. We'll get there. So yeah, as far as like real life, like life update stuff, one of the errands we're running today is to finish like getting some paperwork notarized for the visa so we can get the application sent off, so that will be a thing finally. I need to mow the grass. Honestly, things don't change a whole lot, which I'm fine with. Like, I like the routine. I like that things are fairly chill. Still taking walks almost every day when I have a chance. And then, you know, just living the dream, I guess. Living the Australian dream. Going day to day. The new Arkham Apparel we're holding up. Look at you chilling. Honestly, okay, I'm not gonna lie this time. Like, Lupus just put the windbreaker on ArkhamApparel.com, but we actually ordered it for ourselves, each of us, like weeks ago. We've had these windbreakers. He wasn't sure he wanted to put them on the shop. He designed them and we ordered them, and then holy shit, I love these things. Because we were looking for, he was really wanting a new windbreaker. And we'd gone to several shops, and he tried on like Nike ones and Adidas ones and stuff. And like, they either felt super cheap, and like the little zippers were like kind of thready. Like you could tell they were going to unravel at some point. Or they were too heavy. Like they were super warm, like hoodie weight, which is just too much. So we're like, fuck it. Let's see if we can make something on the shop. And we could, and so we did. And I love these things. Like, it's the nice, like, really lightweight windbreaker that doesn't have any padding to it at all. It does have mesh on the inside, which is great. It's got pockets that zip shut, which I love because I'm always losing stuff out of my pockets. And then, like, the hood, of course. And, like, we took it out for walks, and it's like, it does exactly what it's meant to do. It stops the wind from making you feel chillier than you are, but it doesn't add any, like, weight or extra, like, too much extra warmth, which, perfect. This is exactly what we needed. So, like, I don't think I've left the house without it in the last couple of weeks. So I was like, you need to put that shit on the store, man. Like, it's coming into fall up north. People are going to want this. So, yeah, absolutely stress tested. This thing has gone everywhere with me. And I love it. I love it. Cannot say it. Because if the merch was crap, I would definitely not point you guys towards it. But so far, I don't think anything we've got. No, I take that back. There was one hoodie one time, which I don't think is on the shop anymore, but like it was screen printed instead of like being more fused to the fabric, and the design on my version of it anyway washed off after like 2 or 3 washes. But also I was living in the UK at the time, and my washing machine in my flat there was really violent, so it's possible it just couldn't handle the UK washing machine. But like I said, I don't think that one's in the shop anymore for just that reason. Speaking of stress testing things. So yes, if you need a windbreaker, ArkhamApparel.com, definitely the quality one that we were trying to find going shopping. Like, we thought Nike would make one like that or something, and it just wasn't happening. So yeah, this turned out to be the best way to do it. Living the dream. Hey, Halo. How do I live in Australia with the spiders and other monstrous creatures there? Okay. Yeah, I get that a lot. And so the thing about Australia is a lot of the things here will kill you if you encounter them, but you're probably not going to encounter them unless you go looking for them, you know? Like, I used to live in Florida. There was a lot of shit in Florida that could fuck up your day too. And I don't feel any less safe here. Now, granted, I do live in the suburbs, but we do go out into like preserves and parks and, you know, the more rural areas to camp and stuff like that. And I've never felt like something was gonna get me. Like, I've never seen a snake here, which is good because almost every snake in Australia is venomous, but almost without exception, I think there's maybe one or two that aren't. And of the venomous ones, most of them will really fuck your shit up. Some of them will kill you, but you just don't see them very often. And like, I've seen snake tracks, and that's the closest thing I've seen to a snake after living here over a year and going through all of the seasons. So we're coming into the season where the snakes are slightly more active because they'll be thawing out. So they're going to be moving around a little bit, warming up and moving around. But like the local subreddits, people will still like post a picture where they're like, oh my God, I saw a snake today. Like they're posting pictures because they're rare. You know, like they're a lot more rare than like alligators were in Florida. I saw alligators every day in Florida, which, you know, they weren't scary. They were little, but as far as spiders, again, Florida had spiders too. Like I've only seen encountered two redbacks in or near our house, which redbacks are basically black widows. So yeah, that shit will be a hospital trip if we get bitten by one of those. But most of the spiders I've killed in the house are, if not harmless, at least not super harmful. Like there's one particular kind of house spider here that he's not huge. He's maybe like, including his legs, the size of like a silver dollar, I guess, like bigger than a quarter, but not much bigger. And if he bites, it does really, really hurt, apparently. Like Lupus did warn me not to let him get too close, but he's also like just a pretty ordinary little spider and he's easy to smash, so I just take care of that. But that, again, doesn't feel any different from Florida, and they're not constantly in the house. It's just like when the weather changes and stuff, they kind of find their way in. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm more scared of magpies than anything living in Australia, especially now because we're coming into spring and they're going to get real swoopy here in a bit. So it's time for me to work on winning their trust with pockets full of mealworms when I go for walks. But yeah, it's not, most of Australia is just uninhabitable, honestly. Like if you look at a population density map of Australia, there's like less than 10% of the population of America, for one thing, even though the country is about the same size. And everybody's sort of centered in the same metropolitan areas because those are like tiny, fertile, like waterfront areas compared to the inside of Australia, which is basically the surface of Mars. So yeah, it's fine. It's very, very normal here, I promise. I'm definitely not taking my life in my hands by living here, but if it keeps like tourism down by making people afraid of it, then sure. Now, other parts of Australia, like the other side of the country, has like saltwater crocs and cassowaries and stuff, but why is my hand doing that? I am not doing that. Hello? Wake up, tracker. Oh no. It's doing that thing again. JoJo pose. What's it? Exactly, what's with my hand? I don't know what it's doing. It's not actually tracking properly. Hold on. I will reset. Fix your shit. No, hand down. Hand down. Track lead. Okay. Put the hand down. There you go. No! Put the hand... You know what? Fuck it. Screw the hands. We're not using the hands today. JoJo, hello. Okay, so Arkham Apparel Crocs. Do not put that horrible evil out into the world. higher chance of seeing yeah, so when I lived in Florida, and I've talked about this before, pretty much every body of water in Florida has gators and snakes in it. Like retention ponds, the water table is very high in Florida, so there's a lot of like just little ponds, little lakes, little canals, things like that, and they are all occupied, like literally all of them. There's usually big like pipe systems that connect them for overflow and things like that when it gets really rainy or there's a hurricane, and they travel between the different ponds. In fact, in the spring they travel a lot because they're on the move looking, it's mating season, so they're trying to go mate with somebody outside of their immediate circle, which is when like turtles and alligators get hit by cars the most because they're actively leaving their ponds and going out into the world and making horrific noises. But yeah, I don't think a day went by when I lived in Florida that I didn't see a gator at least, because they just chill like in residential neighborhoods. Like there'll be like a pond as you enter the neighborhood and there's a like 3 or 4 foot gator just chilling on the side of it. Like they're fine, they're harmless. Once they get over a certain size, they usually get relocated. But yeah, biggest one I ever saw in person was probably about 5 or 6 feet, and that one made me a little nervous because he was on the move. He was in the water like swimming around, and that makes me more nervous than when they're just like laying still. But no, I never felt like significantly at risk from a gator. They're just there, they're just fixtures. But you know, the rule of thumb is do not ever go into the water in Florida, ever. I don't care if you're chasing your golf ball. I don't care if you're, you know, whatever. Do not go into the water. No. Honestly, snakes worry me more. I saw quite a few water moccasins living there, and some of them were pretty angry and aggressive, and that will definitely fuck your shit up. So, no snakes. Don't like snakes. Yeah, I don't know what was going on with my hand tracker there. I have not moved, and yet the camera just completely fucked itself, so it's fine. You approve of the JoJo pose. Yay! You live at a golf course in Florida? Yeah. I mean, where I used to volunteer at the dog shelter there was a tiny little pond, and I do mean tiny. Like, I'm trying to imagine if I can give you guys an idea of how big it was. Maybe 10 meters across at its widest point. Like, really small little pond. Probably not even that big now I think about it. And that pond alone had 3 gators in it. Like, and the biggest one was probably about 4 feet. So I would just be careful not to walk the tiniest dogs back there, because every so often they would look at the tiniest dogs like, huh, you're interesting. But do not go into the water in Florida unless there's an egret named Gerald. Yeah, okay, so I broke my own rule. I broke the rule. It's not my rule, it's the rule. Do not go in the water in Florida. But the egret was hurt and I had to help it. You guys probably would have done the same. Probably. He was a good boy. Scorpions, Florida had scorpions. Little ones. Texas had scorpions. I haven't seen any here. I don't know if they're a thing in Australia. It's interesting to me the things that have evolved here, because almost everything here evolved here independently and like completely isolated from the rest of the world. So we have this like overabundance of marsupials. Like 2/3 of the world's marsupials live in Australia. They just evolved here. They completely outpaced the placental mammals and they just took over. And it's like, if you see a small furry critter, it's probably a marsupial. Not that you'll see very many of them, because the little ones don't really come out much, especially during the day. And of course we have the camels, which are not native to Australia, but were introduced back in the 1800s as pack animals and work animals, and now they run feral and free throughout the outback. The largest population of camels, wild camels, outside of the Middle East. So that's a thing. Oh, jeez. What kind of bugs you seen? Spiders are probably the most prevalent, at least in the house. A lot of the bugs are very similar, like earwigs, or weevil type bugs, cockroaches every so often, dragonflies, cabbage moths, little cabbage moths, those are cute. It's not super bug heavy. Birds, on the other hand, we have a ridiculous amount of cool birds here. Lots and lots of parrots, just wild parrots. Love the birds. One of my favorite things about Australia is the birds. So yes. If you were a D&D ranger, what would be your ideal beast companion? Biscuit! Biscuit. Did you see our last session, or 2 sessions ago? When Lupus got the baby displacer beast? It's so cute. His name is Biscuit, and he's a baby, and he's already taken out like 3 people. Like a good little biscuit. And when our next session rolls around, you guys are gonna get to see some really, really cute art. Like, holy shit. Cute art. I really, really want to show you, but I can't. Yeah, Lupus's ranger, he was able to learn summon beasts before because our last session was a 2-parter, so before the first of that one, and made the case that a displacer beast should be allowed to be summoned because it is a beast. It's in the name. And Nikki, our DM, was like, yeah, that's fine, but you have to go with like the weaker stat block. He's like, done. So it's a baby displacer beast named Biscuit. It's perfect. Is Australia worth traveling to for a trip? Yes, with caveats. So, because it is such a big country, you can't see everything, of course. It's like when people come to the United States and they land in New York and they're like, yeah, we're going to spend a couple days here and then go over to LA. It's like, no, you're not. That's not how it works. You cannot see the whole country. It's not possible. And that's kind of how it is here. Like, I'm in Western Australia. It's a 5-hour flight to get over to the east side, like Sydney and Melbourne and stuff like that. So it's, it has to be a very, very planned trip. Getting to Australia from anywhere else is incredibly lengthy and expensive, not gonna lie. Like, it is, like I've talked before, my total travel time when I fly from Florida to here is approximately 37 hours. I spend approximately 26 of those in the air, and a lot of like layovers and going through customs and shit like that. So be prepared. You also, like, going that direction, you lose a lot of time. Like, you cross the international date line. So if you plan to come, it's going to take a good, day to a day and a half to get here, depending on where you're leaving from. And that said, if you're gonna do it, I would say definitely plan to at least stay for like 10 days at least on the ground once you're here. 2 weeks is better, because that is a lot of travel to do for a very short, you can't stay for a short time. My brother actually came to Melbourne for some work stuff, and he was only there for a couple of days, and I was like, holy shit, they made this. He had to fly in from New Jersey to Melbourne for a couple of days of work. Like, no, there's no way he wasn't jet lagged to all shit. So, and of course I didn't get to see him because that's really far from here. So yeah, but if you're going to do it, be prepared for that. Make sure you have enough downtime on the ground to make it worth that kind of travel. When I went back to the States in December last year to see family and stuff before Christmas, it was a 10-day trip. I don't know if I was fully on the ground for 10 days. It might have been more like 9. And I was just completely beat. And part of that was trying to get around and see everybody I could and stuff while I was back. But holy shit, you guys, like, trying to do that turnaround in 10 days or less is really hard. It's really exhausting. And that's after having done it a few times, so I knew what I was in for. So yeah, that's tough. But if you do come, like, it's pretty fucking amazing. Sorry. Sorry, guys. Like, if you have some idea of what you want to see and what you want to do, definitely plan that shit in advance. Like, if you want to see Sydney, okay, see Sydney. Make a list of things you want to see. If you want to go to Melbourne, if you want to go to Perth, if you want to go to Alice Springs, whatever you're into, make those plans in advance. Try to have an idea of what you want to do. Don't just get there and be like, okay, now what? Like, it's not really the kind of place you can do that. I mean, you can, but you'll probably feel like it was a wasted trip if you don't at least have a few things in mind that you want to do. So, but yes, I would say it's worth visiting at least once. For a lot of people, I feel like it's like a bucket list destination. Like, I know my parents are coming probably next April, like March or April. And this will be their first time coming here ever. And they've had it on their bucket list for a really long time. So me living here is now giving them an excuse. Sorry guys, let me take a drink. So yeah, me living here gives them an excuse to come here. Not that they really needed one, but it better justifies it for them. Because once the visa stuff starts, I can't really leave the country until it's finished. So, I mean, I can if I have an emergency or something like that. I can get a special permission from the government. But while they are processing my visa, I'm not supposed to go anywhere. So, and that can take up to a year. And probably will. But that's fine. It's, like I said, it's also really, really expensive to travel here. It's not, like, once you're here, the American dollar is very strong against the Australian dollar. So, as an example, right now it's about like a 2/3 ratio. So, like, something that costs $15 in Australia, that's $10 American, approximately. So, in some ways that's really good. In some ways it makes things very affordable. In other ways, there's just a lot of markup. Like, they think nothing here of spending $30 Australian dollars for, like, a chicken parmesan sandwich at the pub. Like, that's totally normal. To me, that sounds stupid high. But then it's only $20 American, which to me is still pretty stupid high for a chicken parmesan sandwich, I'll be honest. But they do a lot of their own, agriculture, growing dairy, things like that. So most of the vegetables and fruits are very reasonably priced because they are all local. They do their best to be as self-sufficient as possible so they don't have to import any more than they need to, because most, being an island nation as far from everything else as you can possibly be. Yeah, it's a lot. So I would say yes, definitely. If it's a place you've always wanted to go and you find a good deal on airfare and you make some plans and plan to actually stay long enough to make it worth your while, then sure, 100% go for it. I think it's really cool. It's when I first landed in Australia, the first time I came here, it had kind of a Seussian quality, like the trees were all just a little bit weird. The parrots being everywhere was a surprise to me. And like, poor Lupus, like I was like walking down the street like a kid being like, look at that. He's like, oh my God. Like, I think he wanted to put like a toddler leash on me at one point because I was just all over the place looking at everything and being like, oh my God, look at that. He's like, yes, this is how people live here. Now it's all normal. Now it's very, very normal. I don't really notice things anymore, which I guess is good. Although I still get completely blown away by roos. I love kangaroos, and I do still love my parrots. When they come into my yard, I love my parrots. So yes, I do recommend visiting, but I also recommend being prepared to stay a while and get the most out of it. And also don't do anything stupid. Like, just don't be the ugly American tourist if you can help it. Like, it's hard, but yeah. Which, people are very friendly here, but they're also very, like, there's a very strong population of Australians who adamantly don't want to become America. Like, they worry about the influence of American culture, and they get real mad about it. So, and they're very confused by things happening in the United States right now. Like, they saw, like, some of my Australian friends saw the videos of, like, Nazis marching in Florida, and they were like, why aren't there people actively beating them into the ground right now? And I was like, yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? So yeah, they're very confused. But yeah. All right. So where was I? Stories about roos causing damage. The most damage roos do is to like farm properties, like fences and stuff. They can be pretty destructive. They're not like invasive in the sense that like they are native, but they're nuisance. They're nuisance animals because there's a lot of them and they're big, and they, you know, if they hop on or over fences, they can do a lot of damage. They do like to hang out in cow pastures and stuff, so they will do a lot of that. Farmers, not a big fan of roos, like at all. But I haven't really, and people do eat kangaroo meat. It is a thing. I've tried it. It's okay. It's not great. But they don't tend to mess with houses and stuff. No. And they don't tend to mess with people in general. Like when we go out and see roos, we could see hundreds of roos, but they won't let us get closer than a few meters away before they turn around and run, which is fine with me because I don't want to get like kicked by a roo. They're very strong. Also, Lupus is always quick to remind me, kangaroos cannot walk backwards. They can't, because their big tails are like part of their balance and they cannot go backwards. They will turn and go straight in another direction. That's a fun fact about kangaroos, you guys. They can't walk backwards. So, yes. Where was I? That's something that Australia has that the USA should. A lack of tipping culture. I love the lack of tipping culture here. It took me a while to get used to it. I felt like I was compelled to tip like everybody. And they actively frown on it here. They don't want you tipping because some of the like major companies are trying to incorporate that, like Uber Eats on their app will give you the option to tip and stuff like that. And you'll see a lot of articles from people being like, don't do it, because the more people tip, it's going to inspire the people in power to be like, oh, well, in that case, we can lower, you know, we can lower minimum wage and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a huge movement to keep tipping culture out of Australia. They don't want it to be a thing. They want people to get paid a living wage. Also, the national minimum wage in Australia is $23.23 an hour Australian, which works out to about $15 an hour American. So already they're way ahead of us on that. That's just the nationwide minimum wage. It's higher in some places, but that's the base. Whereas in the base in America is $7.25 an hour, which it's been for like 14 years. Anybody, I mean, I can't imagine, I don't understand why the American government thinks people can live on $7.25 an hour. That's absolutely appalling. So, also Australia's better at accommodating their native populations, I think. Like, of course, back in the day they weren't, but they've done a better job of at least acknowledging how shitty they were to natives in the past, whereas America sees it almost like a badge of pride, I think. Like, how many treaties have been broken and stuff. Like, it's weird how much America shits on native cultures. But yeah. What else is Australian that USA should have? Oh, mandatory swimming lessons. Every child in Australia takes swimming lessons. It's required. It's part of their school. Like, they get bussed away from their grade schools for a couple weeks out of the year and taken to a local pool and taught to swim. Everybody must learn. I approve of that. I think it's important that everybody know how to swim. Here it's because, you know, the waters can be pretty dangerous. There's dangerous currents, there's great white sharks, there's irukandji jellyfish, you know, things like that will absolutely ruin your day. But I just think it's good in general for everybody to know how to swim. That's a big one. What else? Also, to be fair, because the sun here is pretty brutal, remember they had the hole in the ozone layer for a while, way back in the day? It's mostly repaired, but the sun here is far more dangerous than the sun in most of the United States. So the rule here is kids pretty much have to wear hats. Like, it's not a law, but like at schools and stuff, they won't let kids go outside to play if they're not wearing like a bucket hat. No hat, no play. And they have very active campaigns for things like putting on sunscreen and wearing hats when you go outside. Like, the government puts a lot into these catchy little campaigns to make sure people do these things. Because skin cancer. Obviously, a more universal healthcare system would be certainly nice. Like, Australia has Medicare, which works pretty fucking well, honestly. Like, you have the option of private insurance, you have the option of private hospitals and private doctors, but if you genuinely can't afford it, Medicare and the public options will cover your ass. Like, it's there. And even when you go to the private places, you get like money back on your copays and stuff through Medicare or through whatever insurance you have. Like, when I go to the doctor, I have private insurance because I was required to buy it when I came here on the student visa. And when I go to the doctor, they give me a receipt. I pay maybe anywhere from $30 to $50 American for the visit. And then they give me a receipt, and I go back and I scan it and send it to my insurance company. And literally the next day, they deposit at least half, if not the whole amount, back into my account. And it's next day. So can't complain about that. Also, my doctor is open 7 days a week. I literally go to the doctor on like Sundays sometimes. And I can walk there. It's close. So love that. Love that a lot. Don't love, like, the things that are frustrating are things like just being this isolated means it takes a long time for stuff to get here. If you order something, it can take literally weeks. Because of that, malls are still very big, like shopping centers are big, because it's easier just to go buy what you need at a shopping center than it is trying to order something, because next day Amazon isn't really, like, there's some things that are next day. There's one big Amazon distribution center here in this side of the country, but mostly it just takes a while, so you just gotta go into the shops and get what you need. And the grocery stores are all like part of the shopping centers. Like one end of the shopping center will be the grocery stores, and then the rest is the mall. So you'll see people pushing carts full of groceries through the mall, and that's totally normal behavior. And I had never seen that before until I was here. But yeah, and now I'm used to it. I don't even see it anymore. So that's pretty cool. Trying to think of what else is frustrating. Getting a driver's license here is definitely harder than in the States, because you have different layers of like permits, like the learner's permit, of course, but also then after that you're on your P plates for a while, which has restrictions on like different, basically saying like, we know you just got your license, so you're not fully able to do everything yet. But some of that's just on the honor system, letting people know. Okay. Magpie nesting season. Yeah, magpie nesting season is the spring. It's a window of a couple of months, but each individual magpie couple will, nest for a few weeks, basically. And in that time, they are really aggressive. They will swoop the shit out of you. So yeah. Is the visa permanent once I have? Yeah, yes. The short answer is yes. It is a permanent resident visa. There are a few more steps to making it permanent, like after this initial application and they review it for like a year, then they basically come back and they'll be like, okay, it's granted temporarily, are you sure you still want to stay here? And at that point it can become permanent with, again, another up to a year review. So, but yes, once it's in process, I should have access to pretty much all of the things residents have. I should be able to get Medicare, things like that. I don't think I'll be able to own property. I think that's the one thing I still can't do. But most everything else, I'll be able to buy life insurance, which has been frustrating me because I wanted to do that for a while. So yeah, these are the things that are going to make it easier. Plus the whole like not having to go to school thing just to stay here. That's kind of important. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling back through the chat. Kangaroos, hot weather tauntauns. I mean, you try to ride one. I don't think anybody should try to ride a kangaroo. Fuck. Although some of the big beefy ones you easily could. The boomers you could definitely ride. Don't do it. Don't ever do it. Yeah, about the tipping culture. Yeah, it's... And I realize, again, some states in the U.S. do pay, if not a living wage, at least a better minimum wage than the federal standard, but a lot of states don't. Like, right at this moment, I think the minimum wage in Florida is $11. I think it's about to go up to $12. But again, that's not remotely keeping pace with the cost of living, especially in Florida. And we've talked about that before, how ridiculously expensive it is to live almost anywhere in the States. And I know people will be like, oh, you can live in North Dakota for way cheaper. It's like, yeah, but why would you? Like, if you have a job, you have things you need to do, you need to be near resources and stuff. Like, just going to a middle of nowhere place isn't really an option for a lot of people. So here in Australia, The internet is not ideal. It's getting better. We live fairly close to the city, so we probably have the best, but it is a lot cheaper. When I was in Florida, I was paying like $160 a month for decent internet, not the highest tier, but decent. And it also had like the TV stations bundled with it, which I didn't use, but if I didn't do that bundle, they were going to cap my usage. So I had to do the stupid bundle. So it was like 160. And I think at least 100 of that was technically the internet. 100 or 120 of it was the internet part. Here we have the top tier that's available at our address, top level internet. And it works out to, I want to say, hold on, I can do the math. I have the little, I'm going to convert this to American dollars. So $70 a month American for the maximum level of internet that we can get at this property. So yeah, that part I'm okay with. That part I like. What else do they definitely do better here? But yeah, I'm all for paying people. You know, if you do a full-time job, if you do a job that people need, like people need people to clean stuff and make hamburgers and things like that. Like we need a service economy to do things so that we can, you know, get around and get the things we need. We need those people to be doing those jobs. So to say that those people don't deserve a living wage to do those jobs is bullshit. I don't care if they're technically skilled labor, although I would argue that if you work back of the house at McDonald's, you are skilled labor because that shit ain't easy. It's just depending on what kind of skill you have. But regardless of skill level, if you're doing a full-time job that society needs you to be doing, you get to live on that. Like you shouldn't have to have 6 roommates and 2 jobs to survive. That's bullshit. So yeah, that's my little soapboxing about that. Okay, let's see. What about disability? You failed swim class? They do have accommodations. They're actually very good about accommodating whatever needs accommodating here. Like they're better about it, I think, in a lot of ways than the States are. But here's a fun thing. So, you know how in the States, like pedestrians pretty much have the right of way all the time, even if they're just in the middle of the street, like you have to yield to them? That's not the case here. The only time pedestrians have right of way here is if they're in a crosswalk, a marked crosswalk, which here they call the zebra crossing because it is striped. In fact, they call it a zebra crossing because they pronounce it wrong. But if you're not in a zebra crossing, you are not protected by the law. Which isn't to say someone's going to hit you, because of course they're not going to try to hit you. That's just a pain in the ass and you're going to hurt their car. But like, no jury in the land would convict for hitting somebody who wasn't in a zebra crossing. Like, that fascinates me. Because Australian culture is basically one of take responsibility for yourself, you cunt. Like, it's just, don't fucking walk out in the middle of the street where there are cars. Jesus. I just like that one. That's one of my particular favorites. And I'm very careful to look before I cross streets, even in my neighborhood, because there are no zebra crossings. There are marked crosswalks, like marked places where you're supposed to cross, but they are not protected crossings. So I am very careful. Okay. Let's see. Sorry, I'm scrolling back. I know I've missed a lot because I've been talking. The David insurance company responding within a day and actually giving out money instead of taking 6 weeks and arguing with you about it. Yeah, I know, right? I literally just scan the receipt, send it to them. They're like, yeah, that tracks. Here's your money back. I'm like, thank you. Sometimes they keep a little. Like I went to the doctor the other day just for a checkup and like a follow-up on some of my those low vitamin levels and stuff, and got some more blood work done. And then I picked up a prescription, and I want to say I got about half back on the prescription and the doctor's visit. So not terrible. And yeah, the doctor's visit was 80 Australian and again, this wouldn't cost anything if it was a public doctor's office and I had Medicare. but because it is a private, and they're very careful to tell you that if you are this is a private medical office, and therefore there will be a fee associated with it. And it's Lupus's doctor too. We both go to the same doctor, and same thing. He pays a fee when he goes, and then they have, like, if you're an Australian citizen, they have your Medicare number stored in the system. So the minute he pays, they're like, all right, well, that's going back into your Medicare then. And he's like, cool. That's just like, they just handle it, which is amazing. That's not to say things aren't necessarily expensive. Like, at one point there was a test that he needed, and it was a sort of test that in the States would have been like thousands of dollars out of pocket, like even with insurance kind of thing. Like, it was just like stupid. And because in the States you've got like co-pays and deductibles. The deductible thing is such a scam that, like, you're paying hundreds of dollars a month for insurance, but they still won't cover anything until you've paid another few $1,000s out of pocket for the things that you're getting done. And once you finally max out that, they'll start doing something. And it's like, why am I paying you? Like, I don't think I ever, when I lived in the States, got more back in insurance coverage than I had put in for the year. You know what I mean? Like, of the money that was going in for my insurance coverage and the co-pays I was paying and the fees I was paying and the deductibles I was paying, there was never anything that insurance covered for me that came anywhere close to those costs. Anyway, this test that would have been really expensive in the States was like $200 here. And he thought that was a lot. Lupus was like, that's really a lot. And I was like, what? No, it is not. Holy shit. Like, but it's perspective. And I guess, like, empirically, a few $100s is always going to be a lot, but like, we're so conditioned in the States for that to be like medically, like, costs are so much more than that we just think, oh my God, $200 for something medical, that's a steal. Like, no, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't have to be that expensive. What inspired you to move or go to Australia originally? Several things. I had gotten pretty disillusioned with the States, especially Florida. I had lived there for a while and was getting increasingly frustrated. I had a family member who was heading to the UK for university, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go too. I'm going to get a flat over in the UK, and I'm going to see how I like that. And so I did. I got a flat. A couple of them actually, off and on, and spent about 6 months living in the UK. Decided that I really liked it there, but it was pretty fucking expensive, I'll be honest. And started looking for a job there so I could stay. Ended up not getting a job because the kind of work that I do, like, work visas aren't really a thing. Like, especially in the UK, they're very, very, very limited on their work visas, which is hilarious after Brexit, I'll be honest. They need workers in the worst way. But if a company has work visas to give, they're usually giving them to, like, IT people, healthcare workers, teachers, things like that, like things that are in absolutely dire need. People like me that do, like, corporate communications and marketing, they can find somebody local for that. And they frequently did. So there were a lot of times that I was, like, in the top two, but they ended up going with the person who didn't need sponsorship, which I completely understand. But you can only stay in the UK for 6 months on a standard visitor entry. So, that reminds me, if you're coming to Australia for a visit, you need to get a visa. It's super easy to do. You can do it on an app on your phone. It literally, like, the minute you apply, they usually will just go ahead and approve it, like, automatically. And then it's good for up to 3 months of time spent in Australia over the next year, cumulatively. So, like, within that time, you can come and go as long as it doesn't add up to more than 3 months. But you still have to do it. You can't enter the country without getting the visa. Also, if you come to Australia, you cannot bring in animal products, agricultural products, meat, dairy, vegetables, nuts, dirt from, like, other countries, like on your shoes and stuff. None of that is allowed in the country, so keep that in mind as well. They will seize that shit at customs and make your day pretty rough. But anyway, so I liked the UK, ended up not being able to stay there. Came back to the States for a few months to kind of reassess my options, and was talking to Lupus, because at the time, Lupus and I had already been friends for a few years, and he's Australian, and we were talking about, housing arrangements and stuff, and decided that maybe we should give this a shot. So we did, and it turned out to be a really good idea. I very much like it here. This is like a nice mix of like American type vibes with also like UK type vibes. It is very much like a hybrid feeling, and it feels like weather-wise more like Florida did. The UK, as much as I loved it, was pretty cold. And yeah, I mean, obviously there's lupus, who's a big selling point. Don't tell him I said that. Okay, cold weather drink of choice, hot chocolate. Duh. And if it's late, maybe hot chocolate with a splash of Baileys in it. They send an attorney every reach out and to tell us about the magical land of Australia. Hey, I'm happy to talk about it. Because before I lived here, it was magical to me too. It really was. Like, people live there? What's that like? Yeah. It's different getting a driver's license. Yeah, it's harder. I mean, they still have to do like the practical tests or the written tests and like the practical like logging hours and stuff with your parents and stuff like that. But they don't do any sort of driver's ed through the schools. It's all private. So if you take an actual driver's ed class, you have to do that like on your own time outside of school. And then you're on your learners, your L plate, and you are required to, as you're driving around with like a parent or something in the car, you're required to display this letter L on your car to let people know that you are a learner. And then, like I said, after that, you go to your P plates for like a year, I think. So yeah, it's a little more complicated. It's not terrible. You can get your license. Obviously, everybody does, but like, it feels more complicated than it was in the States. Put it that way. Let's see. The answer is not raising the minimum wage. I'm going to make a comment here, and take it or leave it. But if a company cannot afford to pay its staff enough to live on, that company shouldn't exist. Period. If you have full-time workers and you are in an area with a particular cost of living, whether it's a high cost of living or a low cost of living, and you expect your full-time workers to work for you full-time and give their best work, and you don't pay them enough to survive in that area for that work, you shouldn't exist. I don't have any defense for companies, because the whole thing about minimum wage is it's to stop companies from basically enslaving people. If companies could pay less, they would. If they could get away with paying nothing, they would. Companies are in it for the money. They're in it for the profit, especially if they're publicly traded. They have shareholders. They have, profit to be made. And the workers are the asset. They are the thing that is making that money for them. And if you are a company and you can't pay your workers enough to live on, figure out how to do it or go out of business. That's all I got. If that means raising the price of things, okay. But study after study has shown that basically for places like McDonald's works out to like 50 cents more a sandwich for the people that are buying sandwiches. I'm happy to pay 50 cents more for a burger if it means the person making it can actually afford their rent. Fuck yes, I will. 100% of the time. And price raising does not. Like, again, please, for the love of God, pick up an economy article. Pick up a study. Pick up something that oh my God. I don't want to get off on this up. I don't. But there has been study after study by actual economics professionals, some of whom have Nobel Prizes, showing how raising the minimum wage is not immediately canceled out by higher prices. It doesn't work that way. Because here's the thing, prices are going up anyway. That's inflation. And once they go up, they do not come back down. All that price rising that happened over the last few years with inflation, that shit's not going back down again. Because they don't have to. The companies don't have to lower those prices again. Meantime, people's wages are not going up to match that inflation. If you're getting anything less than a 3 to 4% raise, cost of living raise in your job every year, you are losing money. Because you are being outpaced by inflation. Everything is going to cost more to you personally than it did before. So, no, I'm not going to defend companies who are like, oh, woe is me, we have to raise our prices. Okay, fine, because if someone's getting to make twice the minimum, like the current minimum wage, if they're able to raise it to just $15 an hour nationally, which still isn't great in a lot of places, but it's better than nothing, those people have more buying power, even if you raise your products by a couple of bucks. Like, please, I beg you, before saying things like that, read economic studies by actual, like, academics, not by partisan think tanks on either side. Look for academic studies, peer-reviewed articles if you can, please, because they exist, and see the actual impact of raising the minimum wage over time. Like, it's so important. I cannot stress this enough. And honestly, fuck any company that expects full-time labor for less than a living wage. Just fuck them. I don't care what they do, and I don't care who they are. Find a way to make it work, or shut down. I will not be moved on this. Anyway. Let's see. Streamer, don't forget iron. I will take my iron when I eat, I promise. I promise. Okay, I gotta scroll back because we're pretty far through. Woo. Hold up. Okay. I'm sorry, there's a lot of chat that I missed because I was on my little tiny soapbox. They charge you overinflated prices in the States. For medical stuff, yes, they will. There's a lot of stories out there of people, trying to negotiate with hospitals and stuff, and the pricing is different if you don't have insurance and you're paying out of pocket versus what they charge insurance companies. And to an extent, I get it, at least for nonprofit hospitals. For-profit hospitals can fuck off, but nonprofit hospitals, like, you get a lot of people, especially into the ER, and they have an obligation of care. They have a duty of care to at least stabilize people. They can't do like ongoing treatment, obviously, but if you are in crisis, the ER is required to treat you. Many of those people never pay a dime for that because they don't have insurance and they can't afford it. And that's just it. So the hospital does have to eat a certain amount of cost in that regard. And nonprofit hospitals do the best they can in a lot of ways. That said, I have other issues in nonprofit hospitals, largely the fact that many of them are religiously run and therefore have weird rules about things like pregnancy and stuff, which we're not going to get into. But the Catholic health systems in the United States are incredibly strong and incredibly powerful. And many times it's the only option. In most areas, there is a hospital you can get to if you're lucky. Where I live, I'm lucky. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I like to be, if not in an urban center, at least near one, because I like accessibility to things like options for hospitals and, options for emergency care. I don't like to be too far away from things like fire trucks. I like the proximity to the resources that will keep me alive or, keep my house from burning down if it comes to that. I will trade isolation for those things. And also accessibility of things like, food delivery and grocery delivery and stuff like that. I don't have to make an ordeal out of getting the things I need. So, but yes, hospital costs in the States do vary pretty widely. I've also heard people saying that, like, when they have outlandish bills, they ask for an itemized one, and sometimes that actually lowers the price just by asking for an itemized bill, because then they're forced to sort of own the cost of what they're doing. And yeah, healthcare in America is incredibly fucked. I'm a firm believer in nothing that is required to survive should be a for-profit industry. Food shouldn't be for-profit. Like, obviously, the farmers and stuff who are farming food and stuff, which are strongly supported by subsidies in the United States, at least. Like, if there's a surplus of food and the farmers aren't getting as much per bushel or whatever of what they're selling, the government will subsidize them, because otherwise they will lose money and they won't be able to keep farming. So subsidies are a thing. I'm on board with making sure farmers, like everybody else, get what they need to live, like get a living wage for the work they're doing so they can keep doing it. But things like food, things like water, things like healthcare, things like shelter, even basic shelter, None of that stuff should be for profit. You know, nobody should be making bank over a survival need, you know, a basic survival need. These things should be regulated and capped to a degree so that nobody dies because they can't afford a home or they can't afford medication for something that, you know, whether it's their fault or not. And I don't care. There's people be like, oh, well, if it's a chronic disease or something that they have no control over, that's one thing. But if it's drugs or something else, nah, fuck it. Everybody's human. Everybody's got their own journey, their own story. Everybody's going through it. You know, everybody's got their own shit that they're going through. And I don't care where somebody is in their life or what choices they've made. Nobody deserves to die. You know? Like, that's the basic thing. Nobody deserves to starve to death. We shouldn't have millions of food insecure people in a country like the United States where food is being thrown away on the regular. Like, that shouldn't be a thing. It's so twisted. But because of a for-profit and also incredibly litigious society, like, companies are afraid of being sued if they give their food away. Well, I don't care. People are literally starving. There are children who don't have enough to eat. And anybody that argues against like free lunches in schools can kiss my ass, because there is nothing to be lost by making sure kids have enough to eat so they can study. A child can't learn if they're starving. They can't. And it benefits all of society if children are well fed. Kids well fed, kids go to school, kids get the information they need, they learn, they grow, they become contributing members of society. That's how it works. It's an investment in the future. And yet we have people who think it's totally okay to make children throw away their food if they can't afford it at school. And it breaks my heart. Food should not be a for-profit endeavor. Nothing survival-based should be. So, again, with my rants, and I apologize, but like, no. Healthcare, no. Nobody should choose between paying their rent and buying their medication. When you read stories about people like portioning out their insulin and then they die because they didn't have enough of it. Why? Why are we okay with that? Why is that ever, like, how are companies allowed to make billions of dollars for their investors on the backs of sick people or hungry people? How did we get here? Like, everybody should, like, I'm okay with, like, people making enough money to live, obviously, even at the highest levels of management. Nobody's doing this for free. Nobody's donating their time. Nobody's donating their food or donating their medication. But for-profit markups shouldn't be a thing. Like, especially astronomical ones. We have laws against gouging in the short term, like during emergencies and stuff. So why is it allowed in the macro? Why is it allowed, like, system-wide? I will never understand it. I will never understand it. And people that expect, like, charities to pick up the load, food banks and stuff like that, they can only do so much. They're doing their best. God knows they're doing their best. But relying on the kindness of strangers is a very tenuous model. And they are stretched very, very thin. I will never understand. And I don't understand people that judge, like, people that are on assistance, on food stamps and things like that. Like, if they buy anything that's, like, got more flavor than oatmeal, they're somehow evil. And it's like, we're all fucking people. And I guarantee you, everybody who's complaining about somebody on assistance buying something like a decent cut of meat or ice cream for their kid, those same people are so much closer to being in poverty than they are to being in wealth. Most of us are so much closer to having nothing than we are to being billionaires. And yet, this whole everybody's a temporarily embarrassed millionaire thing is just, it's trite, and I'm done with it. Fuck off. Love thy neighbor. Is it that hard? I'm not even religious. Anyway, I'm sorry. I did it again. Sorry, guys. Okay, I'm scrolling back up now. Yeah, the minimum wage actually should be more like 20. Given the pace of inflation in the last few years, the argument for a $15 minimum wage was fair like 10 or 15 years ago. Now it's definitely a lot more. Okay. What I consider a livable wage. A livable wage will vary by location, but here's what I think the bare minimum should be for any person who's working. And again, this is fairly simplified and ableist language. I know there's a lot of people that can't work, or they can't work outside their homes, or they can't put in full-time hours, whatever. There are varying degrees of ability there, and I respect that, and I think that there should be assistance to match the difference. But assuming an able-bodied, capable person who's able to do these things, like at a full-time, what we consider a full-time off-site work level, like the whole, can you lift 50 pounds and shit like that, like they always ask you when you're doing a job at a shop or a restaurant or something. A livable wage to me is, for full-time work, you should be able to afford a place. Probably, I would say, I don't think we should have to live with roommates. I think that privacy is something that should not be the cost of living and working, is that we give up our space and our privacy. Because I think that's something that's obviously for some people more than others, but it's a pretty fundamental right as well, to have your own space and your own things, like the right to occupy your own space in peace without necessarily having to share it with somebody else, unless you want to, of course, and obviously you can save more money if you do. But I feel like a studio apartment type space of your very own, enough to eat, basic utilities, of course. I consider, internet and stuff to be, they should probably be public utilities at this point because they are so important. A cell phone of some type, like you have to be able, as again, these are things that like people get pissy about poor people having cell phones, and it's like, how else are they going to get a job? Like they need to have a way to be contacted. Like, come on, like that's basic. And once your basic needs are met, a little left over to enjoy, like maybe to have a pizza once a month, Like, it doesn't have to be much. It doesn't have, a living wage is a living wage. You can live on it. Here in Australia, they have something called Centrelink, which is basically it's that. It's basically the bare minimum to live on while you are looking for another job, or if you can't work, it's what they give you to live on. And it is system-wide. Like, if you are non-Aboriginal and you're on Centrelink, you have to show that you are looking for a job, if you have the ability to do it. But it doesn't expire, to my knowledge. You can stay on Centrelink for as long as you need to while you're getting the help you need, and while you're, either getting the help you need, like if you're on a medical leave or something, or if you're looking for a job. And that's the point of it, is it's designed to meet those basic needs. So yeah, in my mind, a livable wage, and that's going to vary based on where you live. If you work for like a McDonald's in Times Square, obviously the cost of living in New York is astronomical. So, and I'm not saying you get to live in Manhattan for that. Like, obviously, you can take the train in. Like, let's be reasonable. But they can't expect you to ride the train for 2 hours just to get to that job, because nothing close enough is affordable. You know what I mean? So, and part of this too actually gets back to the cost of housing, which is another, all of this is intertwined. We can't say pay a living wage and have it be, X amount, and then all of the local rental properties jack their rents up to match, basically, to try and make it like, oh, you've got more money in your pocket, we're going to charge you more for rent. Like, that also shouldn't be allowed, because again, making profit on the need to survive shouldn't be a thing in our society. No profiteering off of people's need to live, need to have shelter. So yeah, that's just the basic, if we apply that rule to everything, if we apply the no profit rule to all of the base survival need things, it becomes a lot simpler. Suddenly there's not as much drive to jack prices on things like insulin. Because you can't, because people need it. So yeah, and I don't think that would have much of a chilling effect on things like R&D, because there's plenty of medical stuff that isn't about survival. Pfizer makes a shit ton on Viagra, let's face it, and nobody needs Viagra. It was developed as a heart drug, actually, but it ended up being a dick drug instead, and that's okay. But it's not a need. That one they can still charge for, and things like that. But at the end of the day, if something is required to live, nobody should be making money off that. Nobody should be making profit off that. So yeah, a living wage should cover things like a small apartment of your own and enough food to live on, and maybe enough for like a pizza. It doesn't have to be fancy. So yeah. Yeah, and going into debt and being a slave to the debt to survive is the American culture. We tell people, if you want to be successful, you have to go to college. And we shit on people who don't go to college. We call them unskilled labor. The guy making your burger at McDonald's, he didn't go to college. Ugh, God, what a loser. He doesn't deserve to make enough to live. Like, A, yeah, he does. Fuck off. And B, college isn't for everybody. And because of the student loan situation, you have a choice. Either you don't go to college and get shit on by people who think you didn't try hard enough, or you go to college, rack up 6 figures of debt, and spend the rest of your life paying that off, and that's not even dischargeable through bankruptcy, which, what the fuck is that all about? Why is all debt dischargeable through bankruptcy except for student loan debt? How the fuck much power do those lenders have? Like, the point of bankruptcy is that if you get so far underwater that you cannot dig your way out, you fuck your credit, but you discharge those debts. Nope, not if it's student loan debt. And we're letting 18-year-olds sign these things, sign themselves up for decades of paying that back at sometimes ridiculous interest rates because that's what's expected of them. Like, I mean, when I was growing up, I was always told, you gotta go to college, otherwise your life is kind of a dead end. It's not true. For one thing, there's so many other paths you can take. Trade school's a thing, and tradies make really good money. Even like I said, if you're just a full-time worker at McDonald's, somebody needs to be making those burgers. Somebody needs to do that work. And that deserves to be paid. And it frustrates the shit out of me that and even if you don't take on student loan debt, for most people, I think they did the latest number was most Americans don't have enough in savings to cover a $400 emergency. And that emergency could be a tire blowing on your car so you can't get to work. Or a medical emergency, fall off a ladder and break something. And just like that, you're up shit creek. Just like that. So many people are just one ladder fall away from not being able to claw their way back. And meanwhile, so many people are trapped in jobs they hate, or just really shitty jobs with shitty bosses, because America, in its infinite wisdom at the end of the wars, decided to tie healthcare to employment. Unlike every other country that chose not to do that. And I know why they did. They did it because there was competition at the time for salaries. They needed workers. And there were rules about how much they could offer to pay, so they tied healthcare in as a benefit, benefits, quote unquote, to sweeten the pot on jobs, to make them look more appealing. To be you get paid, but you also get this. And sure, okay. But at this point, everybody knows people. In fact, many of us are the people, not me anymore, but many of us are the people who stay in jobs and even in cities and states that we absolutely hate because the healthcare isn't bad. The insurance is pretty okay. And we don't want to lose that, especially if somebody in your family is actively getting care for something, if they've got an ongoing illness or something chronic, you don't want to take that away. Because if you switch insurance, even if you get a new job and you switch insurance, those doctors and hospitals may no longer be a network for you. And suddenly you're back to square one trying to find a new doctor. None of that should be a thing. None of it. It's so stupid. But people get so tied down because of that whole link between healthcare and employment. It's maddening. No other country does it this way. So yes. Can I come back to the States and run for president? God, no. No, I did my time in Azkaban. No, I'll be honest, guys. I used to be a pretty hardcore activist. I did a lot of homework. I learned a lot of things, and I was pretty involved for a while. I wasn't like marching. Well, I did some pride marches. Not gonna lie, I did a few of those, including a really cool one in DC. That was fun. But most of the work I did was like more behind the scenes stuff, and I got very involved, and my heart was very much in it. And it's also very easy to like burn out and hit walls when you see just how much the system is acting against you and how many people. It's like that thing about, you know, the people voted, or the trees voted for the axe because his handle was made of wood and they thought he was one of them. You know, it's that vibe. It's people that are actively voting against their best interests or the best interests of their families because, for a variety of reasons. I'm not trying to shit on people who are single issue voters, although I think that being a single issue voter is a luxury most people don't have. And I know people can easily get brainwashed or led astray, and propaganda is a thing, and the bubble that many people live in, or the echo chamber of only hearing what they want to hear and getting reinforced by others of like mind. It's increasingly as increasingly small as the world has become and as connected as we are, those echo chambers are becoming more and more prevalent, and it's very disheartening. But at the end of the day, I was, the uphill battle of my activism didn't really help, you know, like I felt like I wasn't making a difference anymore, and I got very discouraged. Because it is very easy to burn out and be like, what's the point? And I still think there's a point, and I still think it's worth fighting, and I will still, you know, go on rants like this and occasionally post rants online. And when shit like this comes up, like on Twitter and stuff, I feel like if I have any sort of platform at all, I should use it for good. You know, I know there's a lot of people, a lot of creators and VTubers and stuff who are like, don't get political. People don't like that. And it's like, okay, but it affects all of us. You know, I can pretend to be, you know, no thought, head empty, and just goof around and be silly, and most of the time I do. But if something's important, or if something affects the people I care about, or the people you care about, I feel like I have a responsibility to at least share that. And I feel like, as the saying goes, silence is violence. If you don't speak when you have a voice about the things that matter, you are complicit. It's like the people that stand off to the side and watch the bully beat up the other kid. Like, you're not throwing the punches, but you're on the side of the bully. You have chosen a side. If you do nothing, you have chosen a side. If the system is fucked and you do nothing except exist in it and just go, ah, man, it's fucked, what can you do? You've chosen a side. You've decided to be complicit because it's easier than something else. And I can't always do that, you know? And again, it can be exhausting. And so many battles that need fighting, and we can't fight them all. But choosing even something small to focus on makes so much difference. You know, and getting back to my silly metaphors, it's like the story of the guy walking along the beach and throwing the starfish back. You know, thousands of starfish that washed up on the beach. And as he walks along, he's just throwing them back into the ocean. And somebody's like, why are you doing that? You can't possibly make a dent. You'll never make a difference. And he throws another starfish and says, I made a difference to that one. Anyway, I should stop this. I should really stop going off on my little, You guys really get me fired up. All right. Let's see. Hold on. I'm scrolling back up. Have I ever played Skyrim? No. It's been suggested before, but I worry about the addictiveness of it, like a rabbit hole that I will end up going down. The Patreon with Discord. Yeah, there's VCs and art sharing in the Discord. You're always welcome to do that. Yeah, thank you guys for explaining that to Adam. $3,400 up front living with 3 people. That's insane. See, that's insane. Alaska pays its resident. Yeah, I've heard that. And the thing is, it's Alaska. Alaska is, that is a culture right there. I actually had a friend who lived in Alaska when he was working on his PhD in astronomy, because the skies there are very clear. And he lived up there, and boy, was that an experience. Like, yikes. When he finally drove back to the States and relocated to Georgia, it was like a 10-day journey. It was really, really long. Driving down through Canada and stuff. Yeah, no for-profit prisons. Oh God, don't even get me started. Oh, the prison system. I can't touch on that today. I cannot do it. Okay. Absolutely possible to hit a dead end even with college. Yeah. Yeah, it is. 100% it is. It's easy to say don't get political. Yeah. I feel like the people who say, oh, I'm just not political. Yeah, they're the people that have the luxury of not being political. They are the people that the current system is most beneficial to. They don't see the inequalities. They don't see the systemic, oh man, okay. I'm rolling myself back. Vampire Roommate has some political overtones. It does a little. It's, obviously it's a fairly heavy-handed metaphor for oppressed populations, basically. But people can overlay whatever population they wish. Like, it could be LGBTQ population, it could be an ethnic minority, it could be, any number of things could be overlaid into the situation with the vampires in that society and how they are monitored and regulated and sometimes unfairly treated. And you get the idea that it's not entirely unfair because of the history of the two species sort of coexisting, and vampires being actual predators of humans. But at the end of the day, people are people, and yeah, there's some of that in there. But because it is vague enough that you can sort of overlay any discriminated against, any oppressed population, I feel like it works. People relate to it in different ways. I too have heard zombies. What are you talking about? The axe and tree thing? Yeah, the axe and tree thing is pretty common. Did I miss a reference to a Cranberries song? You're cute when you get fired up. Just wait. I got a new patron pick game. I mean, I played it one time before. It's, which one? Is it Outer Worlds that's winning right now? Yeah, I did play that one time before, so we'll play that again. It'll be a good time. That'll be tomorrow. Tomorrow is a patron pick game over on Twitch. Back on Twitch tomorrow. And then, of course, the next day is the recast. So that'll be fun. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate you guys sitting through my soapboxing. I have very strong opinions, and I do a lot of reading and a lot of research, and some things just seem to me to be incredibly obvious, and I know they're not, but like, everybody's got different levels of skin in the game. Some people are just trying to afford medication for their families, and some people are trying to make a shit ton of money off their investments. and the power of lobbies and the influence over the government and things like that. It is a very complicated, convoluted system, and there's no one way to fix it, which is the biggest problem. It has to start small and go, in little ways, with a whole bunch of like-minded people making a difference in any way they can. And it's difficult to organize in a way that will affect significant change in a system this messy. It's just not, you can't even really call it grassroots, because it's so much, it's so big. It's fundamental systemic change to a society that has operated a certain way for a very long time, and that severely benefits those in power, who will cling desperately to that power for as long as they can, and all the people defending them, because they would also like some of that power, please. And they think that if they, bend over for those people, they will maybe someday get a piece. And that's depressing. So yes. Anyway, drawing of Reese sitting on a throne of soapboxes. Oh no. Oh no, don't do that. The thing we think no might be wrong is just a fraction. And that's the thing. I mean, we can choose individual things to focus on, but at the end of the day, like I said, if we focus less on two sides of an argument and more about a fundamental understanding of how things should work, like, again, I think we can all pretty much agree that nobody should be starving. No child should be food insecure in a country as wealthy as America, where food is being actively thrown away. Like, just on paper, we can all agree on that. That, I think, is where we start from. And we say, okay, how do we take the profit out of things like food production so that people can live without this weird drive to put money in the pocket of investors over something as simple as food? Like, obviously there's always multiple sides to every story, but I think if we take it down to its fundamental components, no child should be starving because they couldn't afford food. Like, a limitation of money, a limitation of funds should not lead to actual starvation. Like, that fundamental truth being the core of how we then next take action or next write policy, I think would get us to a better place, you know? But it's important to keep your eyes on the prize and just remember what you're doing it for and who you're doing it for, and not get caught up in, you know, the minutia, I suppose. And it's very frustrating work. The work that I was doing was specifically, it was very much like trying to change the cultural perspective of marginalized people and trying to win hearts and minds, I suppose, is a good way to explain that. And I beat my head against a wall with people who would, at the time, fucking line up on the internet to tell me that I was a monster for supporting certain populations of people. And stuff like that, like, it can be hard because you know you're never going to get through to those people. You're never going to convince them that all human beings have the same right to live and survive and thrive. Like, you can't convince certain people. And it's exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting. But occasionally I would also get a message from somebody who wanted to talk more because they wanted to learn, you know, or they were experiencing something in like their own family and they wanted to be more supportive. And for that, it was like, there we go. There's a heart and mind right there. So great for helping me develop my own writing in terms of characterization and character voice. Good. I'm glad. I do work pretty hard on, in the script, making sure that characters have a distinct voice and that the dialogue as it plays out is as natural as possible, which we've talked about before here with the speaking like human beings will speak and not doing exposition dumps or repeating questions back or using people's names in every conversation, things like that. But yeah, it's one of those things, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And reading it out loud, always a good thing. Even if you're writing dialogue for like stories, books, you know, that you never intend to be read aloud, they're not audio scripts, still read that shit out loud because it will super help with your flow. It's not me against you, it's us against the problem. Exactly. That is a core tenet of my personality, my perspective, is that I don't want to fight other people. I want to get together and fight the problem. And that's true on the micro with like my relationships and on the macro with everything in society. I want it to be a joint effort. So the music change is perfect. Yeah, over on the game channel, Urban Nymph Plays, I do have all the VODs posted from the Telling Tales Weaving World series, which will be coming back. I know I've been dropping the ball on that because I've been getting the recast stuff going. But Telling Tales Weaving Worlds will be coming back. I'll probably end up making it part of the recast because then it just sort of like ties together better. But those were specifically streams talking about storytelling, framing, dialogue, planting versus payoff, things like that that have helped me. And again, your mileage may vary, but these are things that I have learned over time, and I'm about 630 scripts in now on this channel, so which kind of blows my mind. Like I genuinely go back and scroll through my own videos and be like, I made a video about that? Huh, I guess I did. And as I read it or listen to it, I'll be like, I remember this. But like the minute it's out of my brain, I'm on to the next thing. And yeah. Okay. You drink water today? I did. Well, Diet Coke. Briefly discuss the cosmology in which storylines share continuity. Okay. So initially I was pretty okay. So let me oversimplify. Specifically the like comfort audios, girlfriend audios, those don't belong in any particular universe. They can apply to any, well, within reason, any couple. Some people like to think of them as like the same couple on a journey, like having, dealing with anxiety attacks or making pancakes together or whatever. That's totally fine. But those are just microcosms. Those rely less on who those people are and more about their interactions. So yeah, girlfriend stuff and things like that. The Blizzard audio series is not part of any other universe. That one is sort of real world based. There's no fantasy elements or anything like that. And that one ends with them just being a normal couple, which is why it ended there, because at that point, those audios would just sound like the comfort and girlfriend audios. They would be just that couple doing couple things and has nothing at all to do with the Blizzard. So, so those, that series is not part of any like fantasy world. The ones that definitely overlap, Vampire Roommate, Werewolf Listener, those two are in the same universe. In fact, they are friends with each other. They will never be in the same room together because I have a rule about not voicing more than one character in an audio at a given time. I won't do it. So they will just talk about each other as they have in the past. In my head, I consider the Mermaid audio to also be in that universe, Mermaid series. And the, no, that's it. Those three. Hold on. Let me pull up my own list of playlists because I don't want to miss anything. The Kitsune one I consider to be pretty standalone. Where's my list? All playlists. Okay. The Kitsune one, it's because the rules of that universe are a little different. Like in the Vampire Roommate series, the existence of supernatural creatures is not only known, but accepted. They are integrated with society. In the Kitsune series, it is an underground. So, which is how most fantasy and science fiction handles that sort of thing. Like, if you look at shows like Buffy and Supernatural and stuff like that, like almost all of the time, those magical or supernatural elements are an underground existence. They don't really interact with the outside world, and when they do, it becomes notable and it causes problems and things like that. So the Kitsune is more in that vein of we don't talk about the magic stuff around other people kind of stuff. That's why they have their little private parties and their private libraries and things like that. Let's see. The Florist Nymph, that one, and in my head Helen of Troy exist together because mythology is the easiest way to explain that. I generally don't like to mix mythology with fantasy because I consider them separate. Like, I realize they both sort of operate with the same rules, but I consider them separate because mythology to me is a more established canon. It's a series of stories that were written by other people a long time ago, and I'm trying to operate, at least loosely, within the universe that has already been established by the legends that exist. Whereas things like Vampire Roommate, I am writing that world. I'm creating it out of whole cloth, and therefore there is no rule to follow other than my own. And that's not to say I can't be flexible with mythology stuff, because even within mythology, there's a lot of contradictory stuff, a lot of different accounts of the same events, things like that. So, and most of it was from like, epic poetry. So it's meant to be flowery, it's meant to be exaggerated. But because that lore exists outside of me, I consider those to be separate from fantasy, if that makes sense. Let's see. The witch wife, I consider her to be in the same universe as the shapeshifter. So it's sort of a low magic, like, again, magic exists. You can't entirely tell from the context whether magic is public or more underground. And that's by design. The point of those stories isn't as much the world building as it is the interaction between the characters and their individual experiences. But you realize, the shapeshifter keeps herself very isolated, at least up to this point. She exists and interacts with the regular world, but not in a way that would really give her away. But you don't know if that's because magic isn't really a thing or because she doesn't want to be bothered, like, in theory, she could operate within the Vampire Roommate universe as well. And some people like it that way. Some people have said they like her to be in that universe, and that's fine. But in my headcanon, it's the witch wife and the shapeshifter in their own universe doing their own thing. The post-apocalyptic scavenger, obviously completely a separate vibe. I know some people have said they like to think of that as being like the future of these other universes, and that's cool, whatever. It's just a completely different, different planets, different technology. It's completely different. And I will be coming back to that one. That is on my list of things to come back to. I need to bug Maple because he's been really, really busy and now he's finally not. So I need to bug him. I actually told him the other day I was going to bug him. So I need to, So yeah, that one is just sort of isolated. The Kudere alien, that one is it kind of depends on what you like. When I wrote it, it was sort of like the Blizzard, where it was like, this is happening in a world much like this one, basically our present day modern, no magic, no fantasy, no science fiction, except for the fact that this alien shows up and starts doing these things, and there's your science fiction. But it's not like the Vampire Roommate also exists in the world where the Kudere alien is abducting people. So that, in my head, it was a standalone for that reason. But because of that, it can really fit into many of the other spaces that people want it to. And of course, the way it was left, it could conceivably go the direction of the girlfriend stuff, all that nice, soft, squishy, comfort girlfriend stuff. So let's see if I can think of any others. Reverse lore, yes. Call Matt, Pat. Yeah, so the Scavenger series. Oh, and the Elf Bandit. That's the other one. The Elf Bandit is one of the only ones, maybe the only one, that I've spent that much time on that is set entirely in a fantasy universe. And that I did that on purpose. At the time, I had written a lot of these series where it's like the fantasy elements in the mundane world, because I like that sort of thing, and I really dig like merging the two worlds together and having it make logical sense. Like, I freaking love that. But I was like, for the Elf Bandit, I was like, I need something that is wholly fantasy, wholly like immersed in that alternate fantasy world. There's no crossover to the mundane world. And that's why I came up with the Elf Bandit, was that, okay, she's like right out of the gate, we have an elf, so right away we know it's magic stuff. She's a bandit. Okay, well, that gives vibes of, she's not an elf accountant. She's a bandit. This is like in a fantasy type vibe, or at the very least, like old-timey medieval type stuff. And then when the story played out, it was like, this is clearly a fantasy universe. There's clearly magic afoot. And there is absolutely no crossover between that and everything else. Also, that one is going to be the second chapter, the second, like what I'm currently working on is about, I want to say, it's 1 or 2 episodes from the end of chapter 2, I'll put it that way. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to tell what I want to tell in one episode. Probably. But yeah, be warned, the next Elf Bandit you see might be the last one for a while. Because if I can wrap this chapter on that, then we're going to be in good shape. Also, there may or may not be a cliffhanger, and I'm not sorry. Okay. Medusa and Florist Nymph. Well, so the Medusa one is not actually set in the modern day. It's more historical mythology. So technically, yeah, they could coexist. Like the Florist Nymph could still have existed back then. Same with the Water Nymph. Anything that's mythology based can all be comfortably overlapped. It's more about time in that case. So like the Florist Nymph is modern era, and Medusa, and the Water Nymph is also modern era. Medusa is historic, because there are no cars in Medusa's universe, things like that. So, all right, what else? Would I consider reading poetry as content? I actually have. So I'll tell a little story here, and then I'll probably wrap up. The Blizzard series, the second to the Blizzard series, is the coma episode, which there were a couple things that happened to lead to that. One, the first episode of the Blizzard series was not meant to be a series. It was meant to be a standalone one-off where the listener, you guys listen to it and get to decide for yourself whether they live. You guys can just decide, like, do you want them to live or not? That's your headcanon. You go for it. Have a good time. But in the comments, I got so many people asking for a part 2. Like, tons of people. And I realized, well, if they die, the part 2 is, I guess, going to be their funerals, and that's really sad, so I suppose they're going to live. And at the time, I already had a coma audio in the works. I was working on that. So I was like, you know what? I'll make this the coma audio. It makes perfect sense. I'll tie them together. The challenge with the coma audio is that the listener isn't talking back. You know, like most of my audios, there is a dialogue going on, and you are actively contributing to the conversation in ways that I have preset for you in my script. So, but most of the time you guys follow along just fine. Like, I love it when I read the comments and someone's like, every response I was giving in my head was exactly the response that you were responding to. And I was like, yay, that means it made sense. Like, the dialogue was actually something you could follow. So yeah, but, the struggle of being entirely one-sided, like not just normal one-sided, but one-sided to the point where there was no response that I could then respond to, and just talking to this unconscious person proved to be a much bigger challenge than I thought, especially at the time because my channel was so new. So I had to come up with ways to make it interesting, and one of the things I did was read poetry. I read some Whitman, which is one of my favorites, and this also marks the first time that I actually started to cry doing an audio, because that shit choked me up. Like, I was so immersed in the mental picture of sitting and reading poetry to somebody in a coma that I started to cry about it, and got my shit together. You can hear a little bit at the end of the poem when my voice starts to break, but then I got my shit together and finished the audio. And I've cried in other audios since. Anytime you hear me crying in an audio, like really crying, that is real. I don't like fake crying. I think it sounds fake. So I just make myself cry for real, which is great until you can't turn it off because then you're like on that train. Like, it's cry time, baby. All the sad things that have ever happened to you are lined up and ready. Here we go. So yeah. So that poetry is in there. And then, I also did a reading of The Velveteen Rabbit, which isn't a poem, but it's a nice story. And I think on Patreon I did a story from Zeus Grant's Stupid Wishes. In fact, I'm sure I did. So that's a fun one. I can try and do more of it. The poetry, I'll be honest, doesn't do great. Like, people don't really want to listen to me read poetry, but maybe I could do more of that on like Patreon or something. Oh yeah, Ceci, I forgot about her. Sorry, I haven't written a Ceci audio in a while. Ceci is another one that exists in whatever space you want to put her in, because what she does and the work that she does is outside of all of this other stuff. So if you really want Ceci to occupy the same world as a vampire roommate, sure, you can, because what she does doesn't really, like, the fact that there's vampires in the world doesn't impact her job. She still does her job. She still, takes lives and goes about her business. If it makes more sense to you that she exists in a mundane world and there's no magic, sure. But that one I feel like is a personal choice. Some people like to tie her into the others and be like, oh, I wish that Ceci would meet the mermaid or something like that. And it's like, yeah, that could happen, I guess. Like, in your head, that's fine. Obviously won't happen in an audio. But because of the nature of her work, it's a pretty standalone scenario that could, in theory, be inserted almost anywhere. Like, honestly. So there's that. cliffhanger and I'm not sorry. Yeah. Have I considered doing an audio with an actual urban nymph? I mean, the water nymph is pretty close. She does live near a city. The florist nymph lives in a city. So they're about as urban as they get. The Medusa series does not yet have its own playlist. That one and the bootlegger are still, I haven't put them in a playlist yet. I usually wait until it's over 4. Like, while there's 3, I can just link the previous ones in the description. But once it hits like 4, I'm like, all right, here we go. We're going to make a playlist out of this. So that's usually where I cut off. Imagine being able to process a cry. Yeah, it's... I get it. Like, these are not necessarily cathartic cries that I do for the audios. I start myself crying. The worst are the ones, like there was the one for comforting your girlfriend when she's had a really, really, really rough day. That was one of my first intentional cry audios. And that one, it was so hard to stop, you guys. Like, I also did go back and do a lot of cleanup because the sounds you make when you're crying, like the sounds that come out of your throat and all the swallowing and stuff, it's a lot. Like, I had to go clean a lot of that up because it's really gross. But that was like an ugly cry and I could not stop. And I had the heart, like I was like digging my nails in the back of my hands to make me get a fucking grip so I could finish the script because I was dumb enough to put that at the front of the script and then try to keep going after. And it was like, nah, that ain't happening. So, and I get very, like, I'm an emotional person anyway, but I'm a naturally positive person, but I also can get very emotional, and crying for me is one of those, like, default tension breakers, I suppose. Like, if I get very sad, if I get very angry, if I get very frustrated, you know, things like that, like, even very happy, it usually comes out in the form of crying, which is really annoying because, like, so many people see crying as a weakness, and if I'm crying because I'm pissed off, like, I'm not weak, I'm pissed. Like, but it's like it's coming out of my eyeballs anyway. And it's like, no, I'm not like sad right now. I want to murder you. But it looks like, you know, girly weakness. And JoJo and I and Hydrasia are in the Crybaby Club for a reason. Because every fucking thing makes us cry. And we wear that badge with pride, baby. So, yeah. It's crying time. Yeah. Like that time I said it was crying time, and then I cried all over the place. Yeah, good times. Whew. Anyway, on that note, I should probably wrap up. It's been a couple of hours. And, does anyone know a good grief counselor? I mean, local to your area, you'd have to try and... If you're in school, a lot of times, like colleges and universities have mental health resources available. They don't always publicize them, but they are there. So if you're at university, check your student center, check your, you know, dean of students, whoever's got that information. Sometimes they will give you a handful of visits for free. Sometimes there's actually a mental health, like some of the first therapy I ever got was when I was in college, and they happened to have a mental health like department that they were letting like students could just go to, make an appointment and go to. And that was like the first time I ever spoke to an actual counselor. So yeah, definitely if you're in any sort of place that has resources like that, use them. Some workplaces do as well. But again, they don't always publicize it. Sometimes the insurance that you have, if you have health insurance through your company, sometimes there will be like the United States and also Australia for that matter, woefully bad at supporting mental health and mental health resources, but a lot of places will still offer some sort of like at least entry care, like 1 or 2 visits or telehealth or something like that, or hugely discounted things like that. So definitely check that out. Yes. Ceci and the Satan's Collector could share a universe. Yeah, I mean, that could work. And some of them are, you know, one-offs or 2 episodes or something. And for those, I don't really worry as much about the universe they live in. Like Saving the Superhero and Ascension Mech and all those things. Those are, you know, 2 episodes to me is not a series. It's just a first one and a sequel. And those universes I don't think of as being in the Urban Nymph audio universe, I guess, is what we're going to call this, like the MCU. So, all right, yeah, let me wrap this up. And I'm going to go run some errands. You guys, in the meantime, have a great rest of your day, night, or whatever it is. And I'll see you tomorrow over on Twitch for Patron Pick Game Night. So, as always, be good. I'll talk to you soon.